Hey guys, welcome to our first ever video tutorial on this channel. First of all, I just want to thank you guys for supporting me, especially you. You know who you are. We reached 500 subs, yay! And this is my way of saying thank you. So I hope you guys liked it and enjoy. On this lesson, we are gonna be talking about the hair. Hair can be difficult to render because there's a lot of details in there and people don't really know where to start. But do not worry, I'm going to show you how I do it in a more simplified way. I will also going to demonstrate how I render different types of hair, so you can see that my method can work pretty much to any styles of hair. But before I demonstrate my process, let me first give you some kind of intro to the key concept that we will be using on this lesson. So the first concept is to identify the hair as a shape. This is very important because it will allows you to draw hair very efficiently. Seeing hair as a shape like this. Second concept is to know the general flow or direction of the hair. Knowing the direction or flow of the hair will help you easily identify how to put the highlights, lighter shades, shadows, and other elements in a more believable way. If the flow is in this direction, then my brush strokes will follow that general direction as well. Now, the third concept is the highlight. Highlights can make your render looks real, even with just small rendering. Always remember that the direction of the highlights is always perpendicular to the direction of the hair. So if the hair is flowing in this direction, then your highlights would be on this direction. So last but not least, the fourth concept is adding small details. Now this concept usually up to you, but in my style, I add small details such as color variations, highlight extensions, adding darker shadows, etc. But I'll share one small detail that I always add, which is hair strands. Here, let me show you. Just add hair strands outside the general shape of the hair, and voila, hair. One big shave and a few single lines, we got hair. So with all of that out of the way, we can get into our demonstrations. So here's the first one. The very first step that I always like to do is to lay out the base color because it helps me identify where to put the shadows and the highlights later. So let me do just that. So now we are done with the basic shape. What do we do next? Well, the next thing I do is to make the hair more 3D looking. So how do I do that? I do that by figuring out where the light source is coming from. Where are the highlights and where are the shadows? As you can see, as I try to identify the basic shape of the shadow, my brush strokes also follow that direction of the hair. The same rules also applies for the highlights. So what's the next thing to do? I usually do the highlights. Now, when choosing the color of the highlights, there are things to consider, like the color of the light source, the ambient lighting, bounce light, etc. But the rule of thumb that I usually apply, at least in my art style, is to choose the lighter shade of the base color. As I said before, when doing highlights, your brush strokes should also follow the general direction of the hair. Now look at this. With just 3 basic concepts, we were able to create a semi-kinda good looking realistic hair. But guys, we won't stop here because it is time.
Yeah, boy.
to do the most fun thing in this process, which is our fourth concept, adding details. Now, this part of the process usually up to you. If you are already satisfied in this stage, you can stop, no problem. You do you. But in my art style, I'll add a little bit more details. I'm not going to pay attention to every little detail I see. I will only apply those details that are significant, like the darker shadow, bounce light, highlights extensions, and the hair strands. But remember guys, if you are going for a simplified art style, I suggest don't overdo it. Just add enough details to convey that this is a hair. Especially when adding hair strands, if you don't want your character to look like this.
Don't do it, man.
I won't go crazy adding every hair strand I see. I'll just add enough to create that illusion of detail, where when you think there's a lot of details in there, but in reality there isn't. Look at this. Before, after. Do you see that? Few details made a huge difference. So now what I'm doing here is I'm adding more details before we can finish this first example. So there you go, our first example. Before we moved on to the next demonstration, I just wanna do a quick recap. So again, first concept is always think in shape. Second concept is that to know the flow or the general direction of the hair. Third concept is doing the highlight, and fourth concept is the adding small details. So let's do another one. Let's apply the same concept to a curly hair. The first thing, as always, lay down the base color. Then we try to identify where are the lights, shadows, and highlights. Again, always think in shapes. Right now, it doesn't look good, but trust the process. After we lay down the base color, let's make it look like more 3D. So I'm gonna add some mid-tone colors, darker shade of shadows, and highlights. So now I'm adding the mid colors. Now, question that you may have is how to follow the direction of the hair when it is curly. It's actually very
Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
At least in my method, you do it by doing some random circles and then reduce it by erasing some of it. So here's the demo. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I do it. Very easy. Why draw out details when few do trick? Now I'm adding more shadows to add more volume to this hair. So here's before and after. With just few strokes, we managed to create a huge impact. I'm adding the highlights, same rules apply, follow the direction of the hair, but since it's curly, I'm gonna do some random circles and reduce it by erasing some of it. Now the last process is adding small details. To make it more realistic, we will add the hair strands just like so. I'm gonna repeat this, but again guys, don't overdo it, just give it a hint is enough. Remember that less is more. So there you go, before and after. See the difference? Simple detail, huge impact. Now you can stop here if you are already satisfied with how it looks, but to me I think I'll add more color variation, darker shadow, etc. So there you go, that's our second example. Last but not least, I want to show you how to apply the same 4 concept when drawing hair for males. Just like before, we start off by laying down the basic shape and color of the hair. Next thing we do is to lay down where the lighter shade should be. Again, it's okay if it doesn't look right now, we can always fix it later. What matter is we get a sense of where the shadows, light, highlights. So before we get to the highlights, I want to define first the shape of the shadow even more. Again, since the direction of the hair is like this, our brush strokes should also follow the same direction. Same for the highlight, follow the direction of the hair. Now let's reduce the amount of highlight by erasing some of it like this. Now since we've done the highlights, we can move on now to adding some more details, or at least define your shapes even more. Now what I'm doing here is defining the volume of the hair even more by adding more shadows into it. I am also adding hair strands so we can make it more believable with less details. Now, part of adding details is defining the sharp edges even more to add more volume to the hair. So I think I'm gonna stop here. This is good enough for me. Again guys, this concept is usually up to you if you want to add more. And there we go. That is the result of that 4 easy concept. So quick recap of the process. First is to define the overall shape of the hair, applying the first concept. Second is to make it more look 3D. Always remember that the second concept where your brushstroke should follow the general flow of the hair. Third concept is doing the highlights. Fourth, last but not least, is to add small details such as hair strands, darker shadows, more color variation, lighter shade, light, and other elements you see. And remember guys that this process is merely a guideline. If you want to add or remove some process, you can do so. Do what works for you. I hope that this video helped you a lot. Comment down below if it did. If you liked the video and want to see more content like this, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye. Oh wait, look at this.